Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
So looking ahead just a little bit to this weekend, and I know you're excited about Championship Sunday. We'll talk about it here as well, but I'm just trying to put myself at Arrowhead Stadium Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. Just the weather is going to be awful. The good news is the sun's going to be out, maybe a little cloudy, so no snow. But when you're talking about temperatures in the teens, maybe even single digits below free, I don't know about that. To play is one thing. To watch it, I don't know.
Well, if you were covering that game, you'd be in the press box.
And hopefully the doors and windows would be closed.
It's an older stadium, and they've done some upgrades at the facility there, or the stadium. But you rather get the assignment where you're going to New Orleans, little partying beforehand.
Indoors.
Yeah, and it's indoors, and it's going to be another good game. But, yeah, I mean, listen, anyone would sign up. I don't care what the weather is. Like Belichick said, if you're playing at this time of the year, they will play anybody anywhere, and that's the philosophy you have to have.
Absolutely, an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, and we'll get into that here on this Wednesday as we broadcast from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. And with that, let's take off on this Wednesday, tell you what's ahead on the show. It's awards season, and we announce our 2018 winners. Friday marks the 10th anniversary of the NFC Championship game victory against the Eagles. We take a look back, and we'll also take a look ahead to this year's conference championship games. Championship Sunday, at least on paper, appears to be a very, very good one. And, of course, your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show here this afternoon. But first, the news of the day, and, well, nothing official, but word has leaked out that Kliff Kingsbury has added 2 more names to his first ever NFL coaching staff. Reports have James Saxon hired to be the running backs coach and Marcus Robertson defensive backs coach. Saxon is an interesting name here. He spent the past 5 seasons as the Steelers running backs coach, working with both Le'Veon Bell, and then this season, even without Bell, James Conner, did not seem like that offense missed a beat as far as rushing the football. So if it is true that Saxon is the guy, and I know we talked here on the show that Stump Mitchell would be perfect, but if you can't get maybe what we believe is the number 1 guy out there, of course, that has a history with David Johnson, Saxon to me would be the next best hire just based off of what he's done in Pittsburgh and then throughout his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's worked with guys like Adrian Peterson, Le'Veon Bell, and the latest James Conner. So he comes in here, and I got to think that he's going to have a role when it comes to the run game coordinator or running game, just from a standpoint of he's got experience there. So, you know, that's the interesting thing. And to me, if you weren't able to get Stump Mitchell, this is a good hire, a guy that's was on a successful franchise. And, again, he's worked with a lot of good running backs, and hopefully we're including David Johnson in that conversation.
Absolutely. Stops with the Bills, Chiefs, Dolphins, and Vikings. Saxon reportedly the new running backs coach for the Arizona Cardinals. And then Robertson on the defensive side gets reunited with Vance Joseph. Robertson was the defensive backs coach under Joseph in Denver, and that's what he would reportedly be with the Cardinals, is stepping into that position, which he's been with not only with the Broncos but also the Raiders. And here's someone that has extensive coaching experience, plus has played the game as well, former All-Pro, 2-time All-Pro.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that obviously has the experience of coaching the DBs. Now, you know, you start looking at, you know, who they've had over the years, Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., and then I want to say Bradley Roby. Is it Bradley Roby? Roby's one of the wide receivers. He's going to actually be a free agent this year.
Now, can these coaches bring any of these players that are potential free agents? I mean, can we work that deal out too? No?
I mean, you got intel.
That's true. You certainly would have an in with these guys.
But the main thing is that you got guys that are familiar and working in the 3-4, because you look at Marcus Robinson. He worked under Jeff Fisher. Now they ran a 4-3, but the fact that the last couple of years he's been in a 3-4, and you know, listen, we know that secondary has some playmakers. Obviously, you got to get somebody opposite of Patrick Peterson, but you throw in Budda Baker and then throw in, DJ Swearinger, who was a great pickup towards the end of the season. And then even a guy like Antoine Bethea, he's got a little long in the tooth, but he's a savvy veteran, good leader in the locker room. So it's nice to have a defensive backs coach that has experience, and he's worked with other players at a high caliber.
He's also been with Detroit and Tennessee as well. Now, the one main position that is still open, that is offensive coordinator. Several candidates have reportedly interviewed, the latest being both Jim Bob Cooter, who for the past 4 seasons was the Lions offensive coordinator, and in word earlier here on this Wednesday that Jim Clements, longtime NFL assistant, has spoken with the Cardinals about the position. And certainly I'm good with either guy, but and of course Cooter is now out of the mix. He's linked to potentially going elsewhere, but Clements certainly is that name that, because of his experience, it would be someone that, as a head coach, Kliff Kingsbury could certainly lean with.
Yeah, that's his brother must be Tom Clements.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right, Tom Clements, to me, depending on who they're interviewing, to me, he fits the profile. He's been an assistant head coach. He's been in charge of offense. He's worked with a lot of quarterbacks, including Aaron Rodgers. He would not be in a position where, you look at his age and he's up there in his 60s. So I don't think Kliff Kingsbury would be threatened by him. And he's got experience working with quarterbacks and offenses. So to me, when you're putting your running game together, that would be Saxon. And then when you're going with your passing game, Tom Clements could be a guy. And then, again, that would alleviate some of the pressure on Kliff Kingsbury. So, again, depending on who they're interviewing, when you look at Jim Bob Cooter, now that Brian Flores, the Patriots defensive coordinator, is going to get the Dolphins job, and they're going to bring in Jim Caldwell as a senior assistant, it makes sense that Jim Bob Cooter is waiting for the Miami Dolphins job. He could become the offensive coordinator just because Caldwell had him, and we know that's how it works in the NFL. It's a crony system, but, Caldwell was successful in Detroit. Matthew Stafford put up big numbers, at least going into last year. Wasn't a great year for him. That's why they fired him. And Matt Patricia probably wants to bring in his own guy. So you're starting to see some of these guys. Now, another guy that they brought in, and it was reported that they interviewed, was Ben McAdoo. I think Ben McAdoo's obviously got to repair his image. I thought the Giants' offense was able to move the football. Now, he's the guy that benched Eli Manning and broke his streak. But to me, he wants to be a head coach again, but coming in here as just an offensive coordinator, assisting Kliff Kingsbury, a former head coach. So we talk about the defense, bring in a former head coach. So those are some good names considering we're 2 weeks into the search, and we're starting to see guys. I think 5 teams right now still need offensive coordinators. Now, 2 of those haven't filled the head coaching position, but you can connect the dots what's going to happen in Miami.
And then the other name that the Cardinals have spoken with, John DeFilippo, has been hired by Jacksonville. So the Cardinals are speaking to a number of candidates, but it's something that I think because Kingsbury is one of those coaches that is going to be calling the plays, maybe not as desirable as one of those stops in which you're the offensive coordinator and the play caller.
Yeah, I think Tom Clements, he's a guy that, he's not going to ruffle the feathers. He's going to be a guy that's going to help the coach, and I just think having his expertise, and then I think McAdoo's in that same boat. Now you got a former head coach. Kliff's going to have to make the call when to go for it on 4th down, what the challenge, do we punt here? Do we try to go for a 1st down? That's the head coach's job. But having guys on the staff with NFL experience will go a long way.
Yeah, 11 years with the Packers. Clements from 2006 to 2016, quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, and then also assistant head coach. Also a long-time playing career in the CFL. So we'll wait to hear what the Cardinals decide to do with the rest of Kingsbury's staff. Some news on the player front. This is just some postseason honors. A couple of Cardinals rookies receiving not awards, but recognition, if you will. Center Mason Cole was named to the ESPN's All-Rookie team, and Christian Kirk and Zeke Turner named to the Pro Football Writers of America's All-Rookie team. Kirk as a punt returner and Turner tagged as a special teamer. Certainly based off what Cole did all season long, didn't miss a snap. Pressed into duty when A.Q. Shipley got hurt in training camp, and then Christian Kirk, even before he got hurt, we saw how special he was returning kicks, and then Zeke Turner was consistently downfield on coverage units, and I believe led the league in solo tackles on special teams.
Yeah, I think those are going to become 3 household names. Now, obviously, we're aware of Mason Cole. He played every single snap, the only guy on the offense, not only on the offensive line, at the entire positions across the board. And then we talked about Zeke Turner. Maybe he's a hybrid. He could play inside the box, but he's really made the roster based on special teams. And then, you throw in Christian Kirk, you can make the case that maybe he was the number 1 wide receiver last year at some point. If not, worst case scenario, he's number 2. But I think those guys are going to become household names. I anticipate they're going to be on the roster for the next few years.
And, of course, I had Kirk as the number 1 wide receiver for several weeks.
I think you were on an island.
Yeah. And I still might be on an island. But
I'll throw you a life preserver.
Just based off of what the offense did and then didn't do.
True.
When Kirk got sidelined.
And I think because of Rosen and Kirk's relationship and the fact that they, Larry during the season doesn't practice, I just think there was a rapport there, and you could see that they were hitting the gas pedal. I mean, that bubble screen, the throws down the field, the 75-yard touchdown. So you could see Christian Kirk is built a relationship, and he trusts him when he throws the football.
Absolutely. A tremendous first season for Christian Kirk as we are joining you here on this Wednesday from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, broadcasting in our Bose QC35s. As we remind you still to come, you can get involved in the show. We'll get to your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCovered2, hashtag CardsCovered2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show. And a programming note, this is our final show of the week. We've got a little extended break because of the holiday weekend. We'll rejoin you next Wednesday here on Cards Cover 2. All right, ready to hand out some awards, MJ?
Yes.
The 2018 year-end awards as voted on by a panel of experts, us, and the rest of the Cardinals broadcasting department, as the Cardinals certainly didn't have a great season overall record-wise, but there were some great individual performances.
Yep.
We want to recognize those here, and Kyle Odegard of azcardinals.com certainly does a great job of actually kind of organizing this, he joined us all season long on the critically acclaimed segment Cardinals Film Room, and we needed a host for this year-ends awards segment. And since Kyle didn't have anything else going on, and outside of paying attention to what the Cardinals do with the coaching search and getting ready for the Senior Bowl and the Combine and the free agency, but he had nothing else to do, so we invited him back here to Cards Cover 2 for our year-end awards of 2018. But minus the tux, though. This is an awards show. I just figured you'd come dressed to the nine.
Where are the envelopes so we can have some suspense and drama as we're opening up, and we'll let Kyle make the announcement.
You guys are the hosts, I thought, so you should be in the tux.
No, this is your show. I'm perfectly content and okay to say, here you go, Kyle. You are the MC.
I mean, I was just the compiler, but it is fun to see everybody's votes and different.
A panel of 24.
Yeah, it's a big panel, and I think that's good because you tend to get the right winners when you get a bigger group. If it's only like 4 people, you can get some skewed answers sometimes, but it was a fun one. You just want to kind of run it down through what we voted on and what the winners were.
There were some skewed answers if you go individually. we can call out some of our colleagues because some of these were a little bit eye-opening. But yeah, let's go through and we'll start with the offensive player of the year, and this one kind of centered on basically 2 different choices, either Larry Fitzgerald, actually 3 different choices: Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, and Christian Kirk, and the winner was
Larry Fitzgerald was the offensive player of the year. Interestingly, I did not vote for him. I know Craig didn't. Who did you vote for Offensive?
Fitz.
So Mike went with the majority of people. My choice was Christian Kirk, and Craig
I went with David Johnson.
So it's interesting because a lot of these categories, sometimes it'll be overwhelmingly somebody wins, and when we get to newcomer of the year, that's the case. But some of these other ones, it was neck and neck. And for me, I thought even though Christian Kirk got hurt, I thought like his yards per catch were above Larry, and his big playability was a little bit above, which is why I personally went that way. he did get a few votes. Go ahead, Craig, make your case for David, and then we'll hear Mike on.
He was the leading
Fitz.
rusher, second best receiver, and had a team best 10 touchdowns. And to me, that spells offense. But I think a lot of the sentiment went towards number 11 just because, well, he's number 11.
I just thought from body of work week 1 to the final game of the season, I mean, he was really the bright spot of the offense. Obviously Christian Kirk gets hurt. David Johnson was a shell of him, former self, this previous season. And I just thought Larry, 3rd and 23, obviously made some clutch catches. He was able to get to the end zone. And I just think, given the opportunity and the targets, he really was the guy that kind of carried this team based on all of the different things that were going on. Firing Mike McCoy, the offensive line in shambles, losing Christian Kirk, the tight ends didn't step up. He was Mr. Reliable, old reliable, and Mr. Consistent.
Yeah. Then you want to go to Defensive Player of the Year?
The Defensive Player of the Year, your main candidates, Chandler Jones, Patrick Peterson, and the winner was?
Chandler Jones won that one, which, yeah, definitely a two-person race on that one. Chandler Jones played extremely well, and I thought Ron Wolfley made a good point in his comment. He said the Cardinals, because of their rush defense, they weren't in a bunch of 3rd and long situations defensively, when obviously a guy like Chandler Jones loves that because he can really get after the quarterback. So he did a good job. A, there was a lot of attention on him, double teams, and then B, not getting in a bunch of situations where the other team is A, 3rd and long, or B, behind in the game. So overall, even though his numbers might not have been as big as 2 years ago, it was still a really impressive season.
The one negative with Jones was that sometimes he would disappear. Now, whether that was because he was the focus of the other team's offense and it was double teamed, or they just wanted to make sure that he was not going to be a factor in that ball game and he needed a Marcus Golden or a Benson Mayo or someone else to step up. But for the most part, once again, double-digit sacks, working in a brand new position, a new defensive scheme, one he was used to in New England, but still able to lead the team in sacks, quarterback hits, and then tied for first in tackles for loss.
I went with Patrick Peterson. I think his numbers speak for themselves. Actually, I think you can build a case. It was a career year, including tackles, and I know that maybe he's not the most physical player, but he's more of a finesse player. And I thought Chandler Jones tailed off in the final month of the season. And I think Peterson, when you look from week 1, as I mentioned with Larry, body of work, I go with Patrick Peterson.
And sometimes the numbers don't back that up just because, well, when you're not getting thrown to, it's kind of tough to rack up those numbers.
Week 17, he didn't give up a single catch.
Yeah, you're just not throwing his direction.
Yeah, he's very, very impressive. I think either of those votes you couldn't have gone wrong. 2018
year-end awards. Let's go to newcomer of the year, and this was basically a runaway. Although just kind of breaking it down, we'll get to the winner. The winner was obvious. We've already talked about him, and that was Christian Kirk. Just even before he went down. How about that? Some applause out there. I like it. Good job here on Cards Covered 2. There you go.
That's that golf clap.
We've got the family and friends in the audience here on Cards Covered 2, just down the road at Scottsdale. So this is great. But yeah, I just think what he was able to do from the get-go, and really because after Josh Rosen took over at quarterback is when he really excelled on offense.
What I wrote down, Christian Kirk became the go-to receiver for Josh Rosen. There were a lot of questions about size and speed, and I think he proved the doubters wrong.
Yeah, no doubt. It reminds me of the catch in San Francisco where he did the double move and easily got past the cornerback, the screen pass touchdown where he just ran away from everybody. Going into the season, I think the pick probably would have been Josh Rosen unanimously, thinking he was going to have a good season at some point, but from day one of the season, Christian Kirk was clearly the best newcomer in my mind.
A couple of other candidates, Mason Cole, which I thought was a good one just because he was not expected to play. And we are going to call out the voice of the Arizona Cardinals because he went with Josh Rosen. And I don't know, maybe he just voted before the season began and just thought Rosen was going to be the guy.
You'll need Dave Pasch on next week, and he can speak for himself. I don't know.
You got to get past.
You got that Syracuse connection, so
I'll be okay.
Why don't you text him and ask him? They relay it to us.
I think the expectations was that he was going to have a better season, but so much happened against him.
He didn't have a chance at times.
It's unfortunate. I think we're all expecting him to have a monster season, at least comparatively, in 2019. All right, this one, the next category, I always enjoy every single year. The beyond the box score player, the one player who doesn't get the headlines, sometimes maybe even doesn't get the stats, but certainly is someone that you need to have on your team. And you get a range of different candidates in this one, but tell us who was the winner.
Yeah, this is the vote that's always split among like 5-6 guys, and people have different interpretations of what beyond the box score means. It was very close. Corey Peters won it, I think, by only a half vote over Andy Lee. So Corey Peters' family is also around. But I voted for Corey and totally understand Andy Lee, and I think Mason Cole got a handful of votes. Those make a ton of sense to me as well. On the field for Corey Peters, sometimes the job he did against the run, he didn't even get the tackle, but if he plugged a hole and you force a running back to, do a lateral cut, it messes up the timing and you get a nice tackle. So the Cardinals' run defense was poor in 2018, but that was not Corey Peters' fault. He had a nice job.
I remember it was during one of those film room segments, you did a deep dive on Corey Peters on the field and off the field. Was it against San Francisco?
Yeah.
And just the number jump when he wasn't on the field, the Niners were able to gain, I think it was an extra 2.5 or even 3 yards. It was even more than that.
Yeah.
It's just astronomical, and that's the analytics, but it certainly plays a part in factoring in how dominant or how crucial Peters is in that middle of the defensive line.
It's noticeable how stout he is. And then also, when you want to talk about beyond the box score, and I think MJ talked about this in his comment as well, but the leadership aspect, the ability to, support his teammates, but call them out a little bit if they needed to be. There were several times post-game when he said, we're not playing well enough, and he didn't talk about specific players and get in anybody's face, but he let it be known that what was happening, should not be happening. He was willing to, be the bad guy if he was supposed to be the bad guy.
Andy Lee, he definitely filled up the stat sheet this year. And again, you can make the case he was the MVP on special teams, but there were a few others. Exactly. Corey Peters doesn't always fill up the box score, but is the glue of the defense and one of the top leaders in the locker room. And he also was part of the Good Guy Award, where he was available at his locker. And I think it was maybe week 12 or 13 where he said, yeah, some of it is coaching, but you got to stay in your lane. We heard it all year, gap integrity, gap discipline, and he was one guy, and Kyle backed it up with his numbers in the Niners game. I think when he was on the field, it was 3-3 or whatever it was. But the fact is that, guys were freelancing. Guys weren't doing their job. Do your job. Stay in your lane.
I went with Andy Lee just because, special teams, and we've talked about it a bunch
he had an
here on Cards
year.
Cover 2. Just his numbers, he actually set another franchise record as far as punt average, which beat his record from a year ago. And it's just unfortunate that based off of his kicks, the defense couldn't get the other team off the field quick enough, and I can't speak enough about him just because we don't talk special teams unless something goes wrong.
And he got a smattering of votes in different categories, and clearly he was on people's minds. He didn't win a category, but he was there. He got some MVP votes, which that's an interesting question. Like, he might have been the best player on the team for what he does. To me, just the value of a punter can't quite put him there compared to a quarterback or a corner or an edge rusher.
But that's playing 60 snaps a game.
Right. But if you're talking about like best at your position, he probably did the best job among any Cardinal.
Well, just based on the offense going 3 and out and just field position, pinning the opponents within the 20 or even the 15 or 10. That was huge. Unfortunately, they just couldn't stop him on the other side.
The next category that we voted on here on the 2018 Year in Awards, the Play of the Year, and it's either involving Larry Fitzgerald or your candidates. Either involved the play with Fitz, David Johnson, or Christian Kirk, and the winner was?
Winner was the 3rd and 23 conversion in Green Bay, which it was certainly that or the Fitz touchdown pass to David Johnson.
Yes.
Those were the two big ones. The 3rd and 23 one. It was a very impressive play, the way Josh Rosen threw that ball and Fitz caught it with maybe a couple of inches from Eddie Pleasant swinging down and hitting that ball. So impressive job by Fitz, but also where you were in the game, what it meant to you on that drive, and the fact that they won the game. I think it was kind of a cumulative thing other than just the simple play.
course, that's a great explanation for a guy who didn't vote for that play.
I didn't pick either of them, which I was kind of out on an island. I chose the Christian Kirk 75-yard touchdown catch in San Francisco. And maybe it was almost like what could have been type thing, because that was early in Josh Rosen's tenure, and everything that you wanted to see out of two young players you saw on that play. And it was an impressive play by the line, good throw, good catch, showed a lot of things, maybe more about the potential that we didn't see after that. But to me, that was a play that you look back and say, that's what we want to see more of.
Yeah, I was impressed watching that highlight that right there, because you could see he was scanning the field. And at some point he said, I'm going to roll out, and he was eyeing Larry, and Larry was able to come back to that sidelines, and obviously, as Kyle pointed out, within inches of that ball touching the ground. So that was a bright spot for Josh Rosen, the fact that he was able to scan the field and then make the throw, and obviously Larry catches it.
You guys vote for that one?
I did not. I went the sentimental favorite, the Larry Fitzgerald touchdown pass to David Johnson, and what was perhaps potentially maybe – I don't think so, but his final home game and just the timing of it all, and it was just too good of a moment, and that's kind of – I went the sentimental choice with that.
Yeah, I went with that, and to me, it's where they did it against Aaron Rodgers on the road. Mm-hmm. I know Larry and Josh didn't go against Aaron Rodgers, but he only had one loss in the month of December. And, the Cardinals, they deserve to win that game. I know that Mason Crosby missed a field goal at the end, but they earned that victory in inclement weather, so that's the reason why I went with that play.
Could have been a turning point of the season. I think we all thought that might have been a turning point. Not that they were going to be a turning point to get into the playoffs, but certainly finished much better than 3-13. It's unfortunately they just didn't follow up on what they were able to do in Green Bay.
I think that goes back to the idea of should they have kept Steve Wilkes or not. And if you saw progress like that in the Green Bay game and played games similar to that where you were close, then I think Steve Wilkes is still here. But some of those games at the end weren't very competitive like they had been previously, and you needed to see more of that Green Bay game in order for him to stay.
The final category here on this year-end awards show, the most valuable Cardinal.
Another
basically
close vote.
Two candidates involving Larry Fitzgerald and Chandler Jones.
And Patrick Peterson was kind of in the mix, and that's the guy I voted for, which is why I bring it up. But yeah, Larry Fitzgerald won by a single vote over Chandler Jones. Congratulations, Larry. And
Speech.
By the way, are there like a tangible physical award that you plan on giving these when they return?
No, they can just print up the article and put it in their scrapbook.
Print it out, yeah. So somebody's
scrapbook
family
What's that?
member will
Yeah.
do it, yeah.
I picked David Johnson.
Okay.
And what I said is, when given the opportunity, this guy's a difference maker.
Okay, but you didn't have him as your offensive player of the year.
I went with Fitz because I thought he had a better year than David Johnson.
Okay, so all right, so
I'm saying most valuable Cardinal. When
Okay.
he's rolling, he makes his offense go. We saw that in 2016. 20 touchdowns, 16 rushing, and 4 receiving.
See, I split my vote too, where I put Chandler Jones as defensive player of the year and Patrick as most valuable. Maybe we should make some more guidelines, but I felt like I should try to honor a couple of them. I think if I had to choose one, I thought Patrick had a little bit better of a year, and it goes back to sometimes not being able to quantify it. And I think the advanced Pro Football Focus numbers help, and some of the analytics now beyond just tackles and interceptions.
Right.
Because if you don't get the ball thrown at you, you're not putting up those numbers. But the fact that Patrick Peterson plays every game sometimes hides how good he is, because if he ever didn't play a game, I think we would realize really quickly what he means to this past defense.
There's no doubt.
To me, I think he was the most valuable Cardinal this year. He got a few votes, but Fitz won, Chandler Jones was number 2, and Patrick number 3 in that voting.
I like that explanation, and you might have just changed my mind looking ahead to 2019 and beyond.
Okay. Next year.
I'll stick with Chandler Jones. Again, I'll run with the Syracuse group, okay? But I like what you're saying as far as when you talk about player of the year, okay, who had the best season, but most valuable. If you take that person off the field, off the team, what happens to that side of the ball? And in that aspect, and that with that argument, then yeah, to me, there's no question Patrick Peterson, because he basically shuts down half the field or the other team's best receiver, or maybe he's floating between a couple of different guys, and all of a sudden you're not able to get that passing game going.
Yeah, it's always fun. I mean, we could debate this stuff, and I like putting it online because you see everybody debating the different answers, and everybody thinks they're right, and it's hard to quantify some of this, but it was nice. The fact that it was, I mean, you get a pretty clear idea of who the best players were, and then you can go tit for tat on which one should have won. But when you look at it in aggregate, okay, clearly Fitz and Christian Kirk on offense, Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones on defense, Andy Lee on special teams. That, to me, when you think of the season,
yes,
those are the 5 guys that stood out.
And everyone that we've mentioned here, and I know this season was not good. It was awful, record-wise. But you look at these guys that we've all talked about, outside of Fitz, who I think is coming back, they're all under contract. They're all under contract for years, not just 2019. So it would lead to have some optimism going into this offseason, going into 2019, as far as there is personnel in place for a turnaround or at least a dramatic improvement from what happened this year.
Yeah, I think your stars played well. All of them were healthy throughout the season. There isn't anybody coming off a major injury among that group, so
right.
That's a good thing. You need to supplement it, like you're saying, and you need to get some more talent, but that's why people were surprised that the team only won 3 games, because you look at it from afar and you've got David Johnson and Fitz and Christian Kirk and Patrick and Chandler. So there's Pro Bowl talent, Budda Baker, on this team. But for whatever reason, whether it was the depth or the quarterback issues, it just didn't come together.
Well, when you're building the team, quarterback, on paper we could check that box. Obviously, they got to protect and get more weapons. Left tackle, he's got to stay healthy. Pass rusher and corner.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you're building a team, that's really the franchise positions right there. And if you can get those guys and develop them, and they're here for a long time, that means you're going to win more games. Now, I think next year at this time, I think Budda Baker is going to be on this list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's a great player. It's tough because this is only like the cream of the crop where you're only picking one player for defensive player.
And Chandler's going to put up numbers. Patrick's going to put up numbers. Hopefully, Golden returns to form. But it's just from maybe he gets a couple more interceptions if he's playing much deeper.
He's a playmaker, and he's another guy where he didn't play a couple of games.
Yes,
and that defense took a step back. Very much, that's what I think of with Patrick.
Yes,
when you saw Budda come out, the defense took a step back. Patrick would be even more magnified.
Point. Yeah, they definitely missed him.
You could add another category. I know these categories. Well, there's 6 of them that you've been using for a while, but you could even add a category for, not superstar in the waiting or the next big player or something like that.
Breakout candidate.
Yeah. As opposed to doing it, because we always do it right before training camp, but based off their 2018 or, based off their previous season, who do we think is going to make the most dramatic improvement or jump the next season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you can usually see the flashes like you did with David Johnson as a rookie, like you did with Budda Baker as a rookie, and Christian Kirk, to me, is in that role where he was already probably your number 1 receiver before he got hurt, and next year you expect him to have 1,000 yards receiving. If he doesn't, it's already a disappointment in his second season.
Good job as host there, Kyle. We might have to do this again next. You could be the Billy Crystal of the year-end awards here on Cards Cover 2.
I'll get my tux. I didn't realize the dress code that
and
you guys didn't follow. But
if you want to go through the entire list, how we all voted, a 24-person panel, azcardinals.com. Look for Kyle's story online, and you can look at that because obviously we have different opinions. We're all looking at the same thing, and that's what makes it so subjective, and it really creates conversation.
Yeah, and there's an individual voting breakdown, so if you want to make fun of Craig Grialou's picks, go ahead and look on there and shake your head.
Dave Pash's selections, Ron Wolfley, Paul Calvisi, anyone out there, Jim Omohundro, anyone.
We still got guys that are made fun of for their picks from like 3 or 4 years ago, so the internet doesn't forget.
By the way, Kyle, what were you doing 10 years ago?
10 years ago, I was at the East Valley Tribune newspaper.
So just still
just out of Arizona State. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
So 23 years old, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I probably should not have asked
that
question.
You were writing that.
Yeah, I was writing. I wasn't delivering papers.
Well, that's just I opened the door for that one. That was not good. By the way, this
There's
Friday.
nothing wrong with that.
No,
it's
not at all.
living.
Hey, you got to make a living, right?
I'm just talking about the age
delivered
difference
papers
here.
when I was 14.
the age difference here. One guy's
gotcha.
right out of school, and MJ and I, well, we were busy 10 years ago coming up on
Oh,
Friday.
that 4 games.
Yes.
Yes, I know where you're going now.
Friday marks the 10th-year anniversary of the Cardinals' victory in the NFC Championship game. Let's take a look back at that historic moment in part 1 of a 4-part series.
You know, you remember people saying that's the worst playoff team ever, you know, and there were times where I thought that could possibly be true. But what was cool was when we actually got there, you saw guys elevate their game.
Touchdown Cardinals! Larry Fitzgerald!
That was a great team win. But understand, celebrate, enjoy it, understand what we got at stake now.
And the Arizona Cardinals will play for the National Football Conference Championship next week. Cardinal fans, do you believe this football team?
It's like nothing you've ever felt before. Let's get back to business. Let's go get the one next week. And as Todd said, let's shock the world.
It is deafening at University of Phoenix Stadium, site of the 2009 National Football Conference Championship between your Arizona Cardinals and Philadelphia Eagles.
The world's watching, baby. The world is watching, man. Hey, let's show them what time it is, bro. It's our time, man.
We had the world on our back, man. We was a, you know, people said we were the worst playoff team ever.
It's our time! It's our time! Believe that! Believe that!
At that point in my career, I wasn't looking just to get to the playoffs, you know. Once you get there and you win a Super Bowl, you've been there a couple times, your whole mindset in training camp is, I want to go to the Super Bowl. That's all I'm worried about is getting to the Super Bowl.
Just look at those NFC Championship logos on the field. Do you believe it? The Cardinals hosting the NFC Championship game. Winner to the Super Bowl.
And I watched that last night, and I watch it again here this afternoon, and I get goosebumps because it was such an unbelievable moment just at that moment, that kickoff. Because it's a quick story. That day, because it was such a big deal and everyone wanted to be there were limited seats in the press box. So there were a lot of us that were downstairs, quote unquote, in the basement, and you had to watch it on television. I got lucky. I was on the concourse to kind of just listen to the national anthem and just realize how enormous the volume of the sound before the game had even started. And as I was making my way back to the elevator, it was going up. Well, I was supposed to go downstairs, and I can't remember who it was. It might even have been you, but someone pulled me in the elevator. Let's go upstairs. Like, all right, I'll go upstairs. And luckily, there was an open seat. I watched the game from the press box. Wasn't supposed to. Was supposed to be downstairs watching it on television. But it was just something that you never would have imagined that season specifically, and even going into the playoffs, because as you heard from a number of players there, Kurt Warner or Carlos Dansby, worst playoff team ever as dubbed by Chris Collinsworth.
Yeah, I mean, the fact the Cardinals got in at 9-7, they hosted the Falcons at 11-5, and you know, you're thinking, all right, you know, the Falcons got a better record, but they're coming to State Farm Stadium, and the Cardinals win that game, and then they go to Carolina, and like I always say, Jake Delhomme hasn't recovered since, even though he played in Cleveland after that. And then you're watching the Eagles and Giants, and you're like, this is possible. The Cardinals are going to actually host at 9-7 the NFC Championship game. And I remember being at the, you know, by the facility, I lived down the street, and there was a line almost to Home Depot of people purchasing tickets. And I told the story before. Dan Bickley and I were on the field at the end of the game. We're looking at the crowd, and there were grown men crying like they never thought this day would ever come. I mean, the fact is that 9-7 team beats an 11-5 team, and I want to say the Panthers that year, they were either 13-3 or 12-4, and then they play the Eagles, who knocked off the Giants. It was just a great run. And to me, I always say this too, don't mean to be redundant, that was Larry Fitzgerald's coming out party. What he did in the first round, the second round, and what against the Falcons, and then you look at the Panthers, maybe not as much, but what he did in that Eagles game, being draped by almost three different guys, and obviously what he did in the Super Bowl.
Great setup, by the way. This is, as I mentioned, a 4-part series. Part 1 we just played. Part 2 just been released on azcardinals.com, and we're going to let you hear it right now here on Cards Cover 2, and it deals with Fitz's dominance against the Eagles.
The great players, they seem to always have great moments in big games. And, you know, Larry has been that guy.
To feel the energy that is in this building right now. This is what playoff football is all about.
We all knew how good Larry was. Larry had already had some incredible regular seasons, but what he was doing was legendary.
Warner takes, short set, has time, looks left, throws over the middle to Fitz, caught inside the 5, breaks a tackle, and Fitz is in! Touchdown, Cardinals!
Again, it's Kurt, like, if we just go to Larry, we're going to be okay.
Warner going deep, airing it out, middle of the field, Fitz is there, he caught it at the 10, at the 5! Touchdown! Larry Fitzgerald!
Larry Fitzgerald is literally trying to will this team to victory right now.
Fade, left side Fitzgerald, he got it! Touchdown! His 3rd of the day!
He literally put the football team on his back, carried him to the Super Bowl.
I think his popularity and the recognition of Larry as the best wide receiver on the planet was right there.
And the Cardinals lead Philadelphia 24-6 at halftime.
Again, a tremendous look back 10 years Friday. This coming Friday, the Cardinals beat the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and what Larry Fitzgerald did against the Eagles and did that entire run in the playoffs, it showed, one, his dominance and his great ability as a wide receiver, but also the progression between quarterback and wide receiver, the fact that Kurt Warner learned to trust number 11, throw the ball within my catch radius. If I don't get it, no one will. But 9 times out of 10, Larry Fitzgerald's going to come up with that football, and we saw it time in and time again that playoff series.
Yeah, and including Anquan Bolden. Kurt would throw to a spot. He trusted you were going to break the route and you're going to come back to the ball. And so that was Kurt's MO. He'd break the huddle. He'd know exactly where he wanted to go with the ball based on the defense and what they were showing, and he trusted you to come back for the ball. But again, Larry, he still owns 2 of the 3 records. He owns, this is postseason, okay? And when you get 4 games, not saying the numbers are inflated, but they had to play in wild card weekend. He has receptions and yards, and he's 2nd in touchdowns. Just that playoff run in 4 games.
Yeah, certainly impressive. Keep an eye out for part 3, part 4, a little bit later on this week here on azcardinals.com for a look back at the 10-year anniversary of the Cardinals' win in the NFC Championship game. Now, 10 years later, the 2019 Conference Championship games, we'll see if they live up to the hype, at least on paper. Look like good matchups. If you got the top 4 scoring teams, Chiefs, Rams, Saints, and Patriots in that order. So we take a look at the first matchup of the day on Championship Sunday, and that is the NFC matchup, Rams at the Saints. They played earlier in the season. Saints handed the Rams their first loss of the season, 45-35 in Week 9. Probably most likely expect another shootout like that, although sometimes you see different matchups or different results because it is playoffs. Things kind of slow down a little bit, but when you have a Drew Brees, when you have a Jared Goff, who both threw for almost 400 yards, and Goff had 3 touchdowns. Brees had 4 touchdowns in that first meeting. I think people expect another high-scoring affair.
Yeah, I mean, you can anticipate it on paper, just where they rank and what they've done over the course of the season. It's not like they got hot at the end and they're scoring 40 points a game. I look at both teams and good offensive line. You make the case that it's pretty balanced and even. But I look at the two-headed monster, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, and then you throw in now C.J. Anderson, who's like 235 pounds. When he got let go from the Raiders, he said he just went home and sat on the couch and he gained weight. He kind of pokes fun at himself how he looks right now. He's only 27 years old. And then if Gurley's healthy, I think we're, again, keeping their offense on the sidelines is going to go a long way in this game. But I do think they have the ability to stretch the field. But I would think at some point you're going to have to run the ball and create a little bit of balance on offense at least when it comes to run pass.
Yeah, Anderson and Gurley had a franchise playoff record, 273 rushing yards in the win over the Cowboys. Now, the AFC title game, Patriots at the Chiefs. We talked about the weather at Arrowhead, a high of 12 degrees. Might even dip below that. No snow, but it is going to be cold. Another rematch from the regular season. Patriots won that game 43-40 in Week 6. It was the Chiefs' first loss. Difference, though, that game was in Foxborough, this game in Arrowhead, and we know how well the Chiefs play at home. Patriots, yeah, they're very, very good, but interesting on how few times they've won on the road in the playoffs in this Belichick-Brady era.
Yeah, you look at a couple times against the Steelers, and I want to say when Peyton Manning was with the Broncos.
Correct.
One thing that sticks out is speed. I mean, I know Belichick, he tries to attack your weaknesses. I don't know if there's a weakness. Now, I do think they miss Kareem Hunt. Obviously, you got to move on. But Tyreek Hill, speed, okay? Travis Kelce, you can build a case he's probably him and Zach Ertz and put Gronk in there maybe from a more blocking standpoint. And Patrick Mahomes, he can make all the throws. So it'd be interesting to see. Now, we know that Brady could throw 50 times or they could try to run it 40 times between Michelle, thank you. And then James White, Rex Book holder out there. So, I mean, they do it by committee, and then you throw in their wideouts. Dorsett, Edelman's playing really well. You could tell that he missed the first 4 games of the season. I thought that was his best game in his career in the previous week, the way they were throwing the ball to him. So, interesting. I think they can match him talent-wise, but speed is the biggest difference in this game when I look at the Patriots roster and the Chiefs roster.
Oh, and experience as well. Brady, 28 postseason wins, and this is Mahomes' first postseason run in just his second year as an NFL quarterback. But bottom line, it should be a lot of fun on Saturday, and then we'll break it down when we return. Again, programming note, no show Friday, no show Monday. Cards Cover 2 will resume 1 week from today here from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center when myself and Mike Jurecki rejoin you here next Wednesday. All right, before we head on out of here, let's hear what the Bird Gang has to say here on this Wednesday afternoon as the Bird Gang sound off via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show. And we'll begin with Twitter, and this is a question that a user brings up that has been brought up by a number of different people. Quote, why no offensive coordinator hire already? Should we be concerned when the entire staff is mostly put together except QB coach and O coordinator?
I mean, they're trying to find the right guy. I mean, there's a handful of teams out there that don't have coordinators, and guys will start getting a little nervous. But they brought in some strong candidates, and we'll allow them to make the decision. You don't want to rush to make a decision. You want to make sure you do your due diligence. You want to hear their thoughts on how they can come in here and be a great addition to the staff. So there's no hurry. The Cardinals aren't playing this week, and so at this point in time, get it right versus being in a hurry.
More on the coaching staff. This user on Twitter wants to know, how do you see this coaching staff working together chemistry-wise, being that the GM, talking about Steve Keim, is pulling together best coach available, and these coaches haven't worked together?
It happens all the time. I mean, that's the NFL. Yeah, you'll get a guy like Vance Joseph. He'll try to bring in a few of his guys. But
he did with reportedly Marcus Robertson.
Yeah, exactly. And so it happens all the time. I mean, these guys are football coaches. Whether they're working for Bill Belichick or, Kliff Kingsbury, you accept your role and you try to bring something to the table. And so it happens all the time. I mean, it's just that's the way the NFL is geared towards now. You go after guys that either a former head coach or they got an offensive or defensive background, and then you try to ask them, who do you trust and who do you want to bring in that can make us better.
One last question from Twitter. If you're Kliff Kingsbury right now, what's your top priority? Is it re-signing players, finding out if Fitz will be back in 2019, hiring an OC, or something else?
Getting your staff together. I mean, he's not going to negotiate with Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, right now they got to get his staff together, and then I'm sure he's putting together a playbook. So, we're all focused on the offensive coordinator and maybe the quarterback's coach, but you got to fill out your staff. They retained Jeff Rodgers. I like that. We know who the defensive coordinators. We really haven't got anything official on the D-line. We know who one of the linebackers coaches is going to be. So I would think the priority right now for Kliff, and let Steve Keim worry about signing contracts and worry about Michael Bidwell with Larry Fitzgerald. Right now, get your staff intact.
Well, when we talked about putting the staff together, I think when you look at it, after you get the head coach, then everyone wanted to know, okay, defensive coordinator, that was taken care of pretty quickly. And then after that, you can make a case, okay, is it offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, or offensive line coach?
Well,
and Sean Kugler's addition, I think, is right up there and maybe even more, I won't say more important, but I think just because it all begins in the trenches and you need that offensive line to protect and open up rushing lanes, that hire might supersede quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator, at least for right now.
Great point. Listen, again, because the coordinator is not going to call plays, Sean Kugler becomes the guy. If you had to ask me who the second most important coach on the offense after the head coach, Sean Kugler.
Because the head coach here is calling plays.
But Kugler, he's going to bring a physicality. He's had a ton of blocking schemes. I mean, as long as these guys can stay healthy, you should see improvement on the football field next year. So if I had to rank them, just as a staff, what we know now, I would put obviously Kingsbury, Vance Joseph, and then Sean Kugler right there next to Joseph, because he's going to do what they're expecting on defense on offense.
I agree with that. Last question here as we move to Instagram. Has Kingsbury and Joseph made a plan to shift the defense back to a 3-4?
That was already announced at the press conference. Steve Keim actually said we're going back to a 3-4. I'm sure at that point Kliff was like, what do you think of the personnel? Let's go 3-4.
Yeah, and we've seen that just over the last 5, well, even before Arians arrived. This team has always been predominantly 3-4, and that's the personnel that has been here that Keim has looked to add, and now we'll see what they do come the draft and free agency. Appreciate the Bird Gang sounding off here on this Wednesday afternoon using the hashtag CardsCover2. Hashtag CardsCover2. A reminder, we'll do this again our next show 1 week from today on Wednesday. And that is going to put a wrap here on this edition of Cards Cover 2. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Omohundro, Devin Henry, and Brandon Natus. Appreciate Kyle Odegard joining us for our year-end awards. Always fun, and he does a tremendous job. If you missed any of it or want to go back and see those plays and then read about them, go to azcardinals.com. Championship Sunday. Real quick, we didn't even bother to give a prediction. Who's playing in the Super Bowl?
I'm rooting for the old guys, the Breeze Brady. Yeah, Breeze Brady. Those young guys got plenty of time.
I'll go. I'll side with you on that. I'll go with that. Just not to see the Rams in the Super Bowl.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Got to give them credit though. They've really turned it around under Sean McVay.
We'll talk about it next week. Enjoy your weekend. This has been Cards Cover 2.